Hey, I'm Nick Kalikas. Welcome to the show where you get first look at the latest odds before they hit the sports books.
And I'm Miguel Iturrate. This is the place for a unique look at MMA from a gambler's perspective.
And this is MMA Oddsbreaker. Welcome to the show. I'm Nick Kalikas alongside Miguel Iturrate.
On today's show, we're going to go over a lot of the news that has broken in the MMA world recently, including Jake Ellenberger's big win over Jake Shields, the signing of Alistair Overeem by the UFC, and the big Dan Henderson, Mauricio Shogun Rua main event.
Yep, and on today's Oddsbreaker segment, I'll be joined by Case Kiefer from the Las Vegas Sun and also John Luther from ShareDog.com. Both Case and John will help me break odds on 3 big fights that haven't hit the sportsbooks yet.
Hey, let's lead off with Jake Ellenberger and Jake Shields. It was a destruction this weekend. Ellenberger looked good. We got a new contender here in the welterweight class. What do you think?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I'm bummed out for Jake Shields because I'm a big Jake Shields fan. But at the same time, I was very impressed with Jake Ellenberger, and I think he needed to go out there and pretty much destroy Shields to be considered a top-notch or a top contender in the welterweight division, I think, by the diehard fans at least.
I mean, the bottom line is Jake Shields is a great fighter. He's 0-2 in the UFC. And it took GSP 5 rounds to beat him, and it took Ellenberger 50 seconds. I'd like to see one more contender fight for Ellenberger. The God's honest truth is I think for my taste, a great matchup would be John Fitch, another wrestler, completely different body types and styles make fights.
I would love to see Fitch versus Ellenberger. So Dana White, Joe Silva, if you're listening, make that happen for us, please. That'd be a great fight.
And so another thing, you know, while you mentioned Dana White, I want to give this guy credit because, you know, sometimes he gets, you know, the reputation of being a hard ass and stuff like that. But he got the negotiations done, and he's got Alistair Overeem in the main event against Brock Lesnar on December 30th, and I'm excited about that fight.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad he did too because they did take some slack a couple years back, especially before Fedor had his recent losses, about not signing him when he was tearing everybody up outside of the UFC. Alistair Overeem recently has been doing the same thing. I mean, the guy's probably one of the most dominant heavyweights out there. He's a K1 champion. You can't say enough about Alistair Overeem, so it's a good thing that they grabbed him and signed him and put him under contract. Now, that fight with Brock, I did open that lineup already, and Overeem is coming in the slight favorite. I think deservingly so. It's a big test for Brock Lesnar, and it's going to be an interesting fight.
Very, very, very interesting. And it's nice to see them transitioning over the Strikeforce guys, which brings us to the next fight, Dan Henderson against Mauricio Shogun Rua. Another light heavyweight battle, possibly a contender fight. I'm dying to see this one too.
Yeah, and it's actually a great replacement bout because they moved over the Velasquez and Dos Anjos fight to the Fox card, the first Fox card. So they needed to fill that void for UFC 139, and what a great fight to fill the void with. I think the Shogun Henderson is what the fans want to see. I did open that line up as well, and I opened Shogun around 160, a little bit too high. The public came in and is taking Henderson in that particular fight, and I know a lot of people think Henderson's got a great chance. Without further ado, it's time for our Oddsbreaker segment. Joining us from the Las Vegas Sun is MMA journalist and sports betting journalist Case Kiefer. Case, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me.
And welcome back to John Luther from ShareDog.com. He's a steady part of our Oddsbreaker segment.
Hey, good to be back. How you doing, Nick?
Great, guys. And I'm excited about things. We made some improvements recently to the Oddsbreaker show, as you guys can see behind us here. So really excited about today's show. For those people that have not tuned in before and are new to the show, this is how it works. BetDSI, our sponsor sportsbook, has donated a $5,000 bankroll to both Case and John. Now, they get to bet $500 on either the favorite or the underdog in each matchup that I select. We're going to start off first from UFC 137. It's a great fight between Roy Nelson and Mirko Filipovic. John, I'm going to start things off with you first. Mirko is going to be the underdog in this fight. I'm going to open Roy Nelson at minus 245, the comeback plus 195. On Mirko Cro-Cop. Give me your take and give me your bet, John.
Well, with a line like that, you know, I got to go with Roy Nelson, actually kind of regardless of the line. Both of these guys, I'm not sure that they are so into, you know, the training aspect of MMA. We know that Roy Nelson, he likes to, you know, do things from home. He isn't so serious about dieting or going to the gym. And, you know, Mirko Cro-Cop, he's a guy who people have really questioned his desire in the sport for a very, very long time. But I think Roy, he can take a little bit more damage. He can dish out a little bit more damage, and he's got the better jiu-jitsu game. I expect him to see Mirko Cro-Cop really quit sometime in like maybe the second or third round. So I'm going to go with Roy Nelson by probably some form of TKO or a decision. I feel pretty good about that line too.
Okay, so you're going to risk $12.25 to win $500, minus 245. Let's throw it over to Case. Case, do you agree or disagree with John's take and his bet?
Yeah, I agree. I think at 2.5 to 1, Nelson's got to be the bet. Look, I think people are going to think he looked bad in his last fight, which he did, but I think the biggest problem was he gassed, and he even said, you know, I was sick, and sometimes we roll our eyes at things like that, but something was off about him that night. I think he's going to be more healthy. I think, like John said, he's more powerful at this point in his career standing up, and I also think he has the better ground game. I'd just be very surprised to see this fight go the other way.
All right, so both guys laying $12.25 to win $500 on Roy Nelson, and I think this line will climb up a little bit because he does have several advantages in this fight, but we're going to see how it all plays out at UFC 137. Okay, moving on to fight number 2, we're going to start with Case. I selected the co-main event at the upcoming UFC on Fox 1 card. A big card, a headliner with Velasquez and Dos Santos, but this is a very important fight at lightweight as well. It's a fight with Benson Henderson taking on Clay Guida. I have Ben Henderson entering as the favorite, minus 235. The comeback on Guida, plus 185. Case, give me your take and give me your bet.
I think this fight is pretty close to being a pick-em to me. I think it could go either way. I really like Clay Guida here at the plus price, plus 185. I just think, really, I think guys have been slow to give him credit lately. I mean, going back to his last fight with Anthony Pettis, you saw no one picking Clay Guida, and I think that's going to be the case again here. But I really think he can get a decision here. I think it's going to be hard. I mean, we've seen how he moves. He's going to be bouncing around. I think it's going to be hard for Ben Henderson to hit him. And, it's obviously not the best matchup for him, but I just think it's going to be really close. And I think I'd probably have to take whatever guy wound up with the plus price.
All right, good point. So you're going to take 500 to win 925 on Guida at plus 185. And let's throw it over to you, John. He made some valid points. You agree or disagree with Case?
I agree with a little bit of what he's saying. I can tell you this, it's going to be a scrappy, hairy fight. You know, somebody actually mentioned on Twitter that they should have Herb Dean referee this thing and have it be sponsored by Head and Shoulders. But for real, this fight, I think that Benson Henderson, he showed me against Jim Miller that he is a scary, scary dude. He can deal with the jiu-jitsu of top-level guys. He's got a wrestling advantage that Anthony Pettis did not have going in here, and I think he's a little bit better wrestler than Clay Guida. But what Clay Guida does is he comes in with a serious, serious game plan, thanks to him working out with Greg Jackson out in Albuquerque. But I think that Benson Henderson, he's impressed me, and I think he's going to be a little bit too much. This is a good pick to, I might even toss a little bit of money on Clay Guida because, there's a possibility for an upset, but my gut really tells me Benson Henderson. I think he's going to walk away with this, probably with a unanimous decision.
So you're willing to lay the juice, though, minus 235?
I'm willing to do it.
Okay, so John is going to risk $11.75 to win 500 on Ben Henderson. So you guys did split there. I think this line is going to probably draw some two-way action. I had to open it a little bit higher than I normally would because of the last line between Pettis, actually, and Guida. Everybody was a little bit disrespectful, let's face it, in that fight towards Guida. And Pettis closed near 300. So you got to factor a little bit that into the equation here, but it is going to be a competitive fight. And part of me wishes that it would be shown on the broadcast of UFC Fox, and hopefully we get to see this fight, but we'll see here. Looking forward to this fight as well. All right, let's finish things off at UFC 140. Another big fight, a rematch between Big Nog and Frank Mir. John, we're going to start off with you. I have the opening line at minus 240 for Frank Mir. The comeback on Nogueira is going to be plus 190. A little bit different than their first initial bout where Nogueira was a decent favorite. John, give me your take and give me your bet.
Well, all the people who were defending Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira after that first fight with Mir, saying he had staph infection, he totally wasn't himself, they're going to get a chance to see if all that talk was just talk or if there was something to it. Here's the thing is, when we talk about Big Nog, we talk about a guy who's in the twilight of his career, at least in my mind. He's taken a lot of damage, and he's trying to really soup up his game and refresh his game by working with guys like Eric Albarracin, working on his wrestling. But in the end, I think that Frank Mir is just a little bit younger. I think he's hungrier, and I think that he's the better stylist in a lot of areas, save for maybe jiu-jitsu. Frank Mir, I think, walks away from this one probably maybe with a TKO victory, but I'm expecting a unanimous decision victory. I feel bad picking all favorites, but hey, that's how it is for this show.
No problem at all. I mean, if you think the guy's going to win and the line has a little bit of value there at minus 240, I don't blame you at all. So you're risking 1,200 to win 500 on Frank Mir in the rematch. All right, let's throw it over to Case. Case, are you going to lay the juice on Frank Mir, or are you going to take the dog money in Nogueira?
I'm definitely going to lay it. I think out of everyone we just talked about, this might be the line I'm most confident in. I just really like Frank Mir in this fight. I feel like Big Nog had a great moment at UFC 134, but really I feel like maybe we were too quick to hype Brendan Schaub as someone that was quite on his level. And I think it masked, some of the things John talked about, that he's getting older. I don't think he can take a punch like he once did. I mean, you saw Brendan Schaub even kind of rocked him there early before he came back. I think Mir is going to cause a lot of problems for him, and I'd be kind of surprised if Frank Mir didn't get a TKO win at this one.
All right, so Case agrees with John. He's also laying 1,200 to win 500. And I think both of you guys, the public's going to agree with you guys, and we'll see the line maybe fluctuate up a little bit more on this fight as well. So again, this fight taking place at UFC 140 should be a great fight.
Hey, welcome back. We're coming out of our Oddsbreaker segment with Case Kiefer and John Luther. Let's see what it does to the odds on these three fights. Nick, what do you think?
Just like the initial action when the bets come in at the sports books when the lines are first released, a lot of the lines tend to move. So that's what we're going to do here, the same type of format. We're going to adjust some of the lines based on Case's and John's bet. So the first fight was Cro-Cop versus Roy Nelson. Both of the guys came in on Nelson. They didn't hesitate to lay the juice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise this line from 245 to minus 260. I think the public's going to agree with them a little bit, and we might see this line climb up to 300, even though I do see some action coming back on Cro-Cop for sure. What's your take?
Well, it's an interesting fight, but Cro-Cop already has that reputation that he's burnt out for a long time now. Nelson has a reputation for being sloppy and coming in, up and down, and he's had some good performances, he's had some bad performances. I think he's going to be a lot bigger, though. I think he's got enough of a ground game and enough of a wrestling game that he should be able to handle Cro-Cop.
Okay, so early on, looks like slight lean towards Roy Nelson, but you never know what happens in a fight, so we'll see what happens there. Minus 260 Nelson, plus 210 Cro-Cop. Moving on, the second fight was Clay Guida versus Ben Henderson, a very competitive lightweight bout with two of the top lightweights in the sport today. I opened Henderson minus 235. I do think he has some advantages in this fight. Guida plus 185. The guy split, so I'm not going to adjust this line. We're going to leave it as is. Give me your take on this fight.
I think it's an exciting fight. I think on November 12th we will wind up seeing it on TV. I don't think Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos goes the distance, so that there will be time for another fight, and this is the one. This is exciting. I think Clay Guida is a guy with a high engine, big motor. Ben Henderson's another talented kid, so I think it's a tough fight to call. I might lean towards Clay on this one, only because when he's an underdog, he tends to fight up.
That's a good point. I mean, a lot of us have underestimated Clay Guida in the past. I mean, we've seen the line. I mentioned it earlier. His last fight between Pettis, everybody just counted him out, and he came through, and he looked great. That was one of the best performances from Guida. So he's an underdog, and he might be worth a shot at an underdog price. All right, moving on to the third fight. It's a highly anticipated rematch between Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira and Frank Mir. I opened Mir the favorite at minus 240. The guys didn't hesitate to lay the juice in the rematch. So I'm going to take this line and adjust it from minus 240 to minus 255 when it does hit the books. A little bit bigger plus money for the underdog in Nogueira. What's your thoughts on this fight, Miguel?
I think it's an interesting rematch. Coming off of the UFC Brazil, there's the feeling that Nogueira's got some rejuvenation coming into his career, maybe a last blast. I'm not sure Mir is a great opponent for him, though, because Frank's, he's a bigger guy, he's a stronger guy. He handled him the first time, and, again, towards the end of your career, a younger guy, and it's just not a good match. I don't think it's not where Nogueira wants to be. However, after all the operations and things, maybe he does have one last blast. We know he's talented in jiu-jitsu, and, I trust Nogueira's boxing. I think he's a great boxer. I think he spent a lot of time in Cuba boxing and learning that craft, and took it very seriously. So he has a chance, but I would take Mir.
Yeah, I think the overall public's going to agree with you guys there, too. But what we did learn from the Schaub fight is you can't count Big Nog out. I mean, the guy's definitely been a live dog in the past, and he could be here as well.
Yeah, I think with Brendan Schaub, I think you had a situation there where just experience kills, and Brendan Schaub was way overrated in terms of not potential or talent. I don't want to put the kid down, but he just doesn't have enough fights, and not to handle a guy like Nogueira.
Yeah, and experience does matter when you get in those matchups. And again, in hindsight, it's easier to say than done. But some good fights on the roster for the future here. And again, all three fights are fights that I'm very interested in seeing. So looking forward to it.
Welcome back. Now it's time for our mailbag segment. And if you have any questions about MMA or the odds or anything for Nick or I, go ahead and send us an email to MMAOddsbreaker@gmail.com. Include your mailing address, and we will send you a T-shirt as well if we use your question.
That's right. And this week's question is Samantha from Florida asked if we think that Dana White will ever give in on women not being involved in the UFC. So basically, are we going to see women eventually in the UFC? And that's a good question. I mean, it's a popular topic, and I, for one, would love to see some women in the UFC because I think they deserve to be there. There's some great fights out there. And sometimes, I mean, you watch a card and there's some great. The women's fights are better than the guys. Let's be honest. You know, but Dana White is pretty stubborn. You know, he sticks to his guns a lot. Do you think he's going to give in?
I think eventually he has to. I actually was the matchmaker for the first all-women show in the United States. And I was sort of against it myself. I'm a purist too. You know, this was before there were gloves and rounds and things. And I really had to give in because they light it up. They light it up. And the bottom line here is this, is the UFC's business model has been modeled very carefully. They do a very good job when, like, for example, they got rid of the lightweight division. There was no 155-pound division for a long time. Now they brought in the bantamweights. They brought it in, and they do everything slowly and methodically. And I think that women's MMA in particular is a great position for them to actually fast-track something and give us something really fast. Not let the women sit for a year and a half while they slowly incorporate the model. I think this is a great opportunity for them to really bring it on fast.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, at first I basically felt the same way the first time women's MMA got introduced. I wasn't too much of a fan, but like I said, once they got out there and they started showing the fights and they produced, I mean, the girls have a lot of heart and some great fights. So I changed my mind very quickly, and hopefully we will see women's MMA in the UFC one day. So Samantha, you got yourself a T-shirt coming from the Oddsbreaker Show. Thanks for the question. We appreciate it.
Yep, and absolutely, it's a terrific question. And just to elaborate one other little thing about it is that it is a lot like the WNBA where, you know, it's a different type of fighting that you're going to see, but you're probably going to see more technique and more fundamentals with the women than you're ever going to see with the men because they just bring it. And at the lighter weight divisions, exactly with, you know, a little bit more flexibility, maybe a little bit less strength and knockout power, you just see more technique.
Yeah, well said. I agree.
Hey, so that's it for this episode of Oddsbreakers here. I want to thank our guests, Case Kiefer and John Luther, and you can look for the odds that we broke on these three great fights coming up on the 23rd or 24th, Friday or Saturday of this weekend.
That's right. And for more information, make sure you guys check out our Twitter page at MMA Oddsbreaker. For Miguel Iturrate, I'm Nick Kalikas saying until next time, enjoy the fights.